All right. Happy Monday. It's good to see everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Liz Wheeler Show. I'm your host, Liz Wheeler. I apologize for being a little late on the uptake talking about the new trove of Epstein files that have been released, 20,000 new documents from Epstein's personal correspondence. It's his emails. And they give us a picture, a chilling picture of the grisly truth. And I want to talk about this today because the way that this came to be late last week, the way that these emails were released, bears some scrutiny. So as I said, 20,000 Epstein emails have been released. My first reaction when I saw the headline that new Epstein emails had been released was to ask the question, where did these emails come from? Where were these? I mean, 20,000 emails, that's a lot of documents. Where were these? Because I was reliably informed by Attorney General Pam Bondi that there was nothing else. There were no more files. There was nothing else related to Epstein that you or I might find relevant. Well, it turns out these files were not held by Attorney General Pam Bondi. They were from the Epstein estate. In fact, a subpoena from the House of Representatives in August begot these emails. In fact, to be very specific, it wasn't just the House of Representatives. It was Democrats in the House of Representatives that selectively released a few of these Epstein emails after the Epstein estate had responded positively to the subpoena. Democrats released a few of these Epstein emails in order to paint Trump in a bad light. They cherry-picked them out of context so that you and I and everyone else in the country would think they reflected poorly on President Trump. Because for some reason, and this is a very odd thing to me, the Democrats have a singular obsession with trying to associate Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, even though there's zero evidence. Like, at this point, don't you think we would know if Donald Trump was associated with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes? It's never going to happen. And yet, instead of moving on to some new line of attack, some valid criticism of Trump maybe, or just a disagreement, they are so obsessed with trying to associate Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's crimes that they released selectively cherry-picked emails to try to paint Trump in a bad light. Thank goodness the House Republicans said, hey, if you're going to do that, that's incredibly dishonest. We, in response, are going to release all of it. We're going to release the full 20,000 pages so everyone can see the actual context of what you released, because it's a form of lying, right? It's lying by omission. When the House Democrats selectively release a few emails to try to paint Trump in bad light, they are deliberately neglecting to give you the full context. It is a lie by omission so that you believe something about Trump that isn't true based on an email that you might take out of context because you don't have the full context. Democrats in the House are not interested in justice. They're not interested in justice for Epstein's victims. They are only interested in this, as I said, this weird fixation on trying to associate Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, even though there's no evidence of that. Even CNN admits that. It does beget the question, though. It does beget the question, why didn't the DOJ subpoena these files in February? Back on the day at the White House with the infamous Epstein binders and the influencers, when Pam Bondi was going on Fox News promising this, that, and the next, why didn't the DOJ subpoena these files? They certainly had the power to do so. If these were held by the Epstein estate and the Epstein estate complied with the House subpoena, certainly the DOJ could have done this. Except I suppose the DOJ didn't want to do this. They deliberately chose not to. So we're going to go through these emails because there is some grisly truth revealed in these emails, but I think it's important that you know. Today's episode is sponsored by All Family Pharmacy. The holidays are a time for travel, family, and celebration, but they're also, unfortunately, when everyone seems to get sick between crowded airports and cold weather and all the running around. No one wants to spend Christmas week waiting in a clinic or a pharmacy line. That's why now is the perfect time to get your medicine cabinet ready so that you can avoid the stress, the delays, and the last-minute doctor visits. All Family Pharmacy is a family-owned pharmacy that actually respects your time and your medical freedom. That's why I love them. There's no insurance hassle, no waiting rooms, and no pharmacy lines. Everything is done safely online, reviewed by a licensed doctor, and shipped straight to your door within just a few days. It's the easiest process ever. They offer more than 300 trusted medications, antibiotics, antivirals, antiparasitic options, like ivermectin, plus complete flu and sinus kits for when sickness hits you or your family fast. Visit them, allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Order today. You can use my promo code Liz10 to get 10% off your order. Get what you need before the holiday rush starts. It's one less thing to worry about this season. And remember, always consult a licensed healthcare provider before using any medication. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, promo code Liz10. Okay. So when the Democrats announced that they were releasing some Epstein emails, these emails were obtained through a subpoena to the Epstein estate. 20,000 total emails were given from the Epstein estate on a rolling basis. I think the Epstein estate began to give them to the House of Representatives back in September, on September 8th, and they continued to give these emails through November 12th, which is when the Democrats began to selectively release some of these emails. But when the Democrats began to release some of these emails, they released them as if there was some big gotcha. And everyone's kind of, you get a little adrenaline spike when anyone claims that they have proof of some dirty, juicy type of crime committed and a politician, even Trump, associated with this. It's a titillating thing because, human nature, we're all gossips. Everyone wants to see the dirt, to see the juice. Well, the first email that the Democrats portrayed, and they did this quite well. The Democrats are quite skilled at using their propagandists in the mainstream media as their mouthpiece to push whatever narrative they want. And the narrative that they wanted pushed was that Trump actually knew more about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes than he let on. Because if you remember, backing up a little bit, Jeffrey Epstein was a member of Mar-a-Lago, President Trump's club in Florida, until President Trump found out about Jeffrey Epstein's wrongdoing, his behavior with underage girls, and then President Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. That reflects incredibly well on President Trump. Jeffrey Epstein ran in the same social circles. That is not something you can blame on President Trump. They have photos together. That's not incriminating. Jeffrey Epstein has photos with everyone. He was incredibly rich. He was incredibly well connected. Everyone in any position of power, influence, or wealth had a picture with Jeffrey Epstein. That was kind of his thing. He collected those photos. But it reflects very well on President Trump that the action that he took when he found out about Jeffrey Epstein was to kick him out of Mar-a-Lago. The Democrats don't want you to think about that. The mainstream media, of course, doesn't report on that. But what they did, the Democrats in the House of Representatives, they released this email. We're going to bring this up on the screen. The dog that didn't bark. So the Oversight Democrats at 8:31 a.m. on November 12th, 2025, posted, and this post has been viewed at this time by over 14 million people. They released the following post. They said, breaking, Oversight Dems have received new emails from Jeffrey Epstein's estate that raise serious questions about Donald Trump and his knowledge of Epstein's horrific crimes. Read them for yourself. It's time to end this cover-up and release the files. Which, by the way, is a little ironic because the Democrats at this time when they posted this were literally sitting on 20,000 additional Epstein emails. Release the files, they claim, acting like they're some self-righteous warriors. Meanwhile, they have access to 20,000 emails that they didn't want you to see because they wanted to selectively cherry pick one in order to try to falsely portray President Trump in a negative light. What a bunch of hacks and liars. This is the email. We can bring this up on the screen. All right. Jeffrey Epstein emailed emailed back in 2011 and said, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Then there is a victim's name that the House Democrats redacted. At first pass, you might think, oh, good, they're protecting the identity of one of these women who was victimized by Epstein. We'll get to that in a moment. Victim's redacted name spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. I'm going to read the beginning of that again because this is the pertinent part. I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Well, that seems significant. That would indicate, you would think, if you're taking this quite literally, this text, that Jeffrey Epstein was emailing that Donald Trump knew about what was happening and yet hadn't said anything. Well, the truth of the matter is, this sounds very bad. The truth of the matter is, if that's true, then this is very different than what we thought. Donald Trump's role in Jeffrey Epstein's life or his knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes are very different. And for a second, I think a lot of people, maybe that thought passed their minds. And that, of course, was the intention of the Democrats in releasing this email selectively. The truth of the matter is, Jeffrey Epstein didn't know at the time that Donald Trump was actually the only dog that had barked. Michael Wolff, the fabulous author, he styles himself as a biographer, but he's basically just a liar. Michael Wolff later told, and I'm going to show you this video, later spoke to the media and said, actually, Jeffrey Epstein came to realize that it was Donald Trump who not only informed on him, but who was the only one cooperating with authorities in their investigation into his wrongdoing with underage girls. Take a look at this.
At that point, Epstein's legal problems began. The police began to investigate him over allegations that he was, that there were underage women coming to his house. Epstein believed that it was Trump who first informed the police about what was going on at Epstein's house. And from that point on, they were nothing but bitter enemies.
And this is what he's telling you. This is one of the instances of what he's telling you. That,
yes.
That
so,
the follow
yes,
that happened.
That is the version of this related by.
Oh, the hoax yesterday.
What Trump is referring to is the hoax that the Democrats.
Okay, so we can stop it right there. So that was Michael Wolff, who had inside access to Jeffrey Epstein, relating to, I believe that was Patrick Bet-David, that Epstein believed that President Trump was informing on him. And from the moment that Epstein believed that President Trump was informing on him, Epstein bitterly hated Trump. So, since the Democrats can't bring themselves to tell you the truth, understand the reality before your own eyes. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were not the friends that the Democrats want you to believe. Epstein hated Trump. In fact, Bradley Edwards, who is a lawyer for Epstein's victims, said that not only did Trump cooperate and help authorities who are investigating Epstein, he was the only one who cooperated and helped authorities when they were investigating Epstein's crimes against underage girls. And it was after this, we can bring this up on the screen, the Democrats on November 12th had also selectively released an email in which Jeffrey Epstein wrote, he said, "I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body, so yes, dangerous." Well, again, the Democrats posted this, and their caption was, "Breaking, newly released emails show Jeffrey Epstein thought Trump was one of the worst people he knew, with not one decent cell in his body." He went on to describe Trump with one word, dangerous. Now, why is that? Why did Epstein describe Trump? That was in 2017 that email was sent, in which Epstein said Trump didn't have one decent cell in his body. That was after Epstein realized that Trump not only informed authorities on him for the crimes he was committing against underage girls, but that he was the only person. Trump was the only person cooperating and helping. And Epstein was angry. Epstein became his bitter enemy. And it was that motivated Epstein to say that Trump didn't have one decent cell in his body. Well, it kind of dilutes the attack, doesn't it? It kind of changes how you view that email when you realize the context of the email itself. Now let's get back to that first email. The one, Trump spent, or let me read it exactly. Let me read this exactly. It's the first one that says, "Victims spent hours with Trump." Well, at first pass, we're like, all right, we're all about redacting the names of the victims. We don't want to re-victimize them or cause them undue even safety issues by having their names revealed. They don't deserve to have their names publicized and be part of this media circus because they were the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. It's okay to redact their names. I think everyone probably agrees with that. But wait a second. The Democrats were taking advantage of your good nature, your charity towards these victims. The Democrats redacted the name because they don't want you to know who that name is. They didn't need to redact the name because this particular victim, Virginia Giuffre, that's who the victim was, has come out herself and talked about being victimized by Jeffrey Epstein. She was, in a sense, a public figure because her name is widely associated with Jeffrey Epstein because she chose to make public her allegations against him. And the House Republicans, when they realized why the Democrats had redacted this particular victim's names, the reason why the Democrats redacted it is not because they were trying to protect Virginia Giuffre's privacy. It's because Virginia Giuffre said in testimony that she gave that President Trump did nothing wrong. Did nothing wrong. And so the Democrats redacted her name because they knew that the fact that her name was in that email belied the false portrayal that they were intending you to perceive. And so the House Republicans released the email without the redaction. Thankfully, I'm glad that they did, because now we know it was Virginia Giuffre, and it changes the whole context of the email. The Democrats are such despicable liars. Such despicable liars. And the mainstream media, of course, are no better. In these emails, the New York Times, a journalist at the New York Times named Landon Thomas, actually tipped off Jeffrey Epstein about law enforcement's follow-up investigations into his wrongdoing. Literally, the New York Times, the mainstream media, tipped off Jeffrey Epstein. This guy was convicted of crimes against underage girls, and the New York Times was trying to help him behind the scenes. Like, how corrupt do you have to be to do this? Why on earth would a journalist from the New York Times try to help a man who is committing crimes against underage girls? Like, how demented is that? Committing evil acts is bad. Helping someone cover up their evil acts is equally as bad. And that's what the New York Times has revealed to have done in these emails. Now, you can begin to see why the House Democrats didn't want you to see this entire 20,000 document trove. A Democrat congresswoman named Stacey Plaskett, she's not very well known. You might recognize her face. You might not know her, or you might. In 2019, there was a hearing in the House of Representatives, and during this hearing, she was live texting with Jeffrey Epstein about how to best smear Trump publicly. And based on the advice that Jeffrey Epstein was giving to Democrat Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, she represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, if you were wondering, it very likely impacted, Jeffrey Epstein's advice impacted how an elected Democrat official tried to smear President Trump publicly. Take a look at this video. It's a Washington Post article, or a video. It says, newly released documents reviewed by the Washington Post appear to indicate that during a 2019, go back just for a second, 2019 hearing where Michael Cohen testified, Jeffrey Epstein was texting with Stacey Plaskett. The Post reviewed multiple video feeds from the hearing and matched the texts, which were sent in Pacific time, with the video.
This was when Barack Obama
was
president of the United States. And while we were once driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago,
right now,
he commented that only black people could live that way.
Are you chewing? From Jeffrey Epstein, Stacey Plaskett.
Attorney-client privilege, yes, I will turn it over.
You, as my friend, Mr. Meadows, pointed out, misled this committee even today in a written submission that contradicted your testimony. You have suggested you are going to review that. Did you review? Are you going to review it in our next break to correct the record? Yes or no?
Yes.
Question: you helped out the president's campaign, or were involved in the campaign as a representative, spokesman, even your words today was your idea for the campaign dating back to 2011. Is that accurate? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Weisenberg and other individuals, Ms. Rona. Who are those individuals? Are they with the Trump organization?
They are.
Are there other people that we should be meeting with?
So Alan Weisselberg is the chief financial officer.
You got to quickly give us as many names as you can so we can get to them.
Yes, ma'am.
Is Ms. Rona, what is Ms. Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his. And
Jeffrey Epstein,
she's
2 minutes later,
involved in a lot that went on.
Stacey Plaskett and says, good work. Jeffrey Epstein was texting words into the mouth of a Democrat elected congresswoman. And it impacted her questions. Meanwhile, Jeffrey Epstein was keeping tabs on Alex Acosta. You remember Alex Acosta. Alex Acosta is the former U.S. attorney who was responsible for the non-prosecution agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, the sweetheart deal that was cut for Jeffrey Epstein that allowed him to escape prison and essentially just go to some, was it halfway house or house arrest where he had like work release. It was like the cushiest possible quote unquote punishment for crimes. It was a sweetheart deal, like the epitome of a sweetheart deal, the very definition of one. And Alex Acosta was the U.S. attorney at the time who cut this deal. And the background on Alex Acosta, of course, is interesting because there have been reports that Alex Acosta, when interviewing with the Department of Justice, was asked, why did you let Epstein off easy, essentially? And the report claims that Alex Acosta said, I was told to back off because Epstein belonged to intelligence. This is the report. We've talked about this many times, this report. Now, Alex Acosta, when he was recently, in the past month, interviewed by the House Oversight Committee, he actually denied this. He said he never said any such thing or anything similar to this. He essentially is accusing the reporter who made this report of lying. I don't know if that's true or not. We have not gotten to talk to Alex Acosta publicly, nor have we been able to see him answer these questions. I would love to talk to Alex Acosta. If he wants to come on the show, I would love to hear. I have a few questions, but I just want to let him tell his narrative. I want to hear this start to finish, because that's a pretty significant allegation to claim that a reporter made that up, that you said nothing even similar to that, but then for Alex Acosta to have remained quiet as his name, if it is a lie, his name was smeared all these years and he remained quiet. I'd be very interested in that because it seems to me that there's something that rings not quite true. And I don't know where the not quite true is coming from. If it's coming from Alex Acosta or the reporter, I don't know. None of us know. But Jeffrey Epstein was keeping tabs on Alex Acosta. In this email on February 18th, 2017, Jeffrey Epstein wrote, "Who will represent Acosta at hearings?" In the email from Roy Black back to Jeffrey Epstein, the response was, he'll be by himself, perhaps a Trump administration aide to assist and accompany him. Now, the hearings to which Jeffrey Epstein was referring in this email were the hearings when Alex Acosta was up for labor secretary. So this didn't even have to do with Jeffrey Epstein's case. This wasn't like, oh, we're keeping tabs on the prosecutor. What's he doing? This was a prosecutor that Jeffrey Epstein had dealt with a decade prior to this email being sent, and yet Jeffrey Epstein is still interested in keeping tabs on him 10 years later. I think this is what my intuition is telling me, my investigative intuition, that there's more to that part of the story. There's more to that part of the story than meets the eye. There's more that needs to be uncovered about the role of Alex Acosta in that non-prosecution agreement, and that report that Alex Acosta, again, he denies it, but that Alex Acosta said he was told to back off investigating Jeffrey Epstein because Epstein belonged to intelligence. What did he mean if he said that? Well, we've proposed some theories on this show. Now, I suppose the veracity of that report is called into question. By the way, the journalist who wrote that, that was in 2019, that Vicky Ward, that's the name of the journalist, wrote that report claiming that Alex Acosta had said that Epstein belonged to intelligence. Vicky Ward. A little bit of a spotted history as a journalist, but I'd also be interested in talking to her. She has an open invitation to come on this show at any time. I would love to hear her side of the story. If she stands by that report, does she stand by her report that Alex Acosta claimed that Epstein belonged to intelligence? Or if she was reporting on this secondhand, who told her that? Was that a planted narrative? Is she wanting to recant that? Was she backing off of that? We'd be very interested in hearing her side of it, especially now that Alex Acosta has told the House Oversight Republicans that he denies that report. I'd be interested to hear from the journalist involved in that. Again, both Alex Acosta and Vicky Ward have an open invitation coming on the show. You know my views on these things. I know sometimes people might be hesitant to come on a show. I'm not gonna drag you or own you or anything like that. I will ask you questions to elicit answers. But it's not an attempt. It's not an exercise in humiliation. You come on the show, you'll be treated fairly. You'll be asked good questions to elicit information, but also, I just want to hear you talk. I just want to hear you tell your story, and I will prompt you in ways that I think might make your story more interesting, or there might be information or a piece of the narrative that people don't know. But if you come on the show, you will be treated very respectfully and very fairly. So that invitation stands at all times. All right, Jeffrey Epstein was also advising the Russian government on Donald Trump, according to this new trove of Epstein emails. And we're going to get to that in just a second, because there's a somewhat, if you can laugh at any of this stuff, which it seems kind of grisly to laugh at this stuff, but if there is an element of humor to any of this, it would be this particular aspect of it. And we're going to get to that in a second. But first, I want to give a shout out to another sponsor of today's episode, Kindred Harvest. Listen, guys, you need to know what's in your tea before you drink it, because the Chinese tea industry has flooded America with products contaminated by microplastics and heavy metals. They don't care about your health. They care about your wallet. Kindred Harvest is the American alternative. They are the answer. Third-party tested, zero microplastics, zero heavy metals, blended and packed right here in the U.S., no compromises, and they have it all. Whether you like morning energy tea or evening herbal tea, they have clean tea for your entire family. I like the immunity tea. My husband likes the sleepy time tea. I think he likes the green tea as well. I even actually keep a bottle of it in case, my throat gets a little scratchy with all the talking. Keep it right here on my desk. Stop trusting China with your family's health. Choose American quality. Choose Kindred Harvest. Go to kindredharvest.co and use code Liz for 20% off. That's kindredharvest.co. Use code Liz for 20% off. I really like it. It's great. Highly recommend it. All right. So Jeffrey Epstein, according to this new trove of his emails, which were delivered to the House of Representatives by his estate due to a subpoena, revealed that Jeffrey Epstein had been advising the Russian government on how to deal with Donald Trump. Again, it feels grisly to laugh at any of this, because obviously what underpins all of this is Jeffrey Epstein's disgusting, gut-wrenching crimes against underage girls, which, by the way, is why people care so deeply about the Jeffrey Epstein files. It's why people are always fixated on it. Because when such a tremendous wrongdoing, evil, no matter who you are, this is the very definition of evil. When an evil act like that is committed in our country, and the person who committed that act, when it's widely known also, right? Like, this is not hard to prove. And the person who committed that act gets off easy. That's injustice. And it's one thing if there's injustice when it's like, not to downplay this, but like a financial white collar crime, right? When it's not as just abjectly morally repugnant as the outright evil of hurting young girls sexually. And to think that, we have to have faith in our justice system. We want to have faith in our justice system. But when we see our justice system fall short in such a high profile and grisly case like this, people just don't tolerate it. They can't tolerate it. Because when there's an injustice like this, that desire to have trust in your justice system is eroded. So even though I sit here today and I say I want to have faith in our justice system, we have the best justice system in the world. It's not perfect, but this adversarial justice system that guarantees due process, where there's the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, where everyone faces equality, equal treatment, no matter what you do for a living, no matter who you are, no matter how rich you are. This is fundamental to our justice system. It's something that we're proud of. And when we see this fall short, not just in a way that, no system is perfect, not just in a way that, a human constructed system of justice is never going to be as perfect as God's justice. But when we see corruption infiltrate our justice system, then we worry about whether we can have faith in this system, and whether, if injustice was permitted or deliberately constructed for someone like Jeffrey Epstein, because of how rich he was, because of how powerful he was, because of how connected he was, then that wasn't a one-time isolated incident. It means it can and it will happen again. And I don't know about you, but that's not something that I can stomach. All of that being said, that is the reason people care about the Epstein files. It's not just because people have this morbid curiosity of, dirty, juicy things that Jeffrey Epstein did. The reason we care about it is because of the injustice. That being said, there is some poetic justice in this particular email. This particular email this is a 2018 email in which Jeffrey Epstein is giving advice to Vladimir Putin about Donald Trump. He's offering insight on Donald Trump in order to help the Russians stage whatever it is the Russians were staging, their efforts against Donald Trump. And the reason that I said there's some dark humor associated with this is because think about Russiagate. Think about how many years we spent hearing the Democrats claim that Donald Trump was colluding with Vladimir Putin. Russia, Russia, Russia. Vladimir Putin is just the puppeteer and Donald Trump is the puppet. Russia has engaged in electioneering. They've meddled in the 2016 election. That's why Donald Trump was elected instead of Hillary Clinton. How many years did we hear that Trump was a Russian asset? Constantly, viciously, from the mainstream media, from Democrat influencers, from elected Democrat officials. And yet the truth of the matter is the actual meddling, the actual meddling and the actual collusion with Russia came from Jeffrey Epstein, who hated Donald Trump, hated him, bitterly hated him, according to the lawyer of the victims, Bradley Edwards, according to Michael Wolff, who had inside access to Jeffrey Epstein, because he was hated. Donald Trump was hated by Jeffrey Epstein because Donald Trump cooperated with authorities and informed on Jeffrey Epstein once he found out what Jeffrey Epstein was doing with underage girls, the crimes that he was committing. Now you don't wonder so much, do you, why the House Democrats didn't want this entire trove released, why they wanted to selectively cherry pick particular emails that they thought that they could use to portray Trump, really falsely accuse him is what they're doing, falsely accuse him of being associated with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes because of this really weird, bizarre, obsessive fixation the Democrats have with trying to associate Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, even though there's never been, and there continues to be, zero evidence that Donald Trump was involved with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes or even knew about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. The Democrats want it to be true, so they are trying to convince you to ignore the evidence before your very eyes and believe them instead. Now, Jeffrey Epstein corresponded with some interesting people. And when I say interesting, I say that tongue-in-cheek here. I'm saying it's interesting why he would be corresponding with these people, not that the people themselves were particularly interesting. And we'll get to that in just a second, too. But the media's role in this whole thing, whether it's the New York Times tipping off Jeffrey Epstein that he was being investigated, again, that there was a follow-up investigation being conducted by law enforcement, or whether it's Michael Wolff, who portrays himself as a biographer, a reporter who writes books about rich and powerful people. You know, Michael Wolff was also advising Jeffrey Epstein on how to blackmail Trump. That's right. You heard me correctly. On how to blackmail Trump in order to hurt the Republican Party. This is a man who's supposed to be a biographer. He's just supposed to write and report about the people, to paint a picture of who they are. He is plotting with Jeffrey Epstein on how to blackmail Trump. If we can bring that up on the screen. This seems significant to me. Here we go. All right. This is from Michael Wolff. Now, this is back in 2015. Back in 2015, the end of December 15th, Michael Wolff writes to Jeffrey Epstein and says, I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you. He's writing to Jeffrey Epstein, either on air or in the scrum afterwards. Now, don't you wonder, first of all, how did Michael Wolff hear about what CNN was planning to ask Donald Trump during a debate? I thought those questions were totally confidential. Oh, are they not? Jeffrey Epstein responded to Michael Wolff and said, if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? Hypothetically crafting an answer for Trump. This is what Michael Wolff responded to Jeffrey Epstein. He said, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. There's the blackmail. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey's a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. To summarize that bluntly, Michael Wolff was crafting Jeffrey Epstein's response to, he was then only candidate Trump. It was during the campaign, in order to try to hurt President Trump and the GOP, in order for Jeffrey Epstein to have blackmail power, coercive power over Donald Trump. When we wrote the title of this episode, new Epstein emails reveal the grisly truth. What is that grisly truth? Well, the grisly truth is not what the mainstream media wants you to think it is. It is not that Donald Trump that it's been revealed that Donald Trump had some association with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes, or that he was aware of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and did nothing about it. It's not that there's any new information in any way, shape, or form that implicates Trump in anything. The grisly truth is that the mainstream media and the Democrats hate you. They think you're stupid. They manipulate you. They lie to you in order to try to plant ideas in your head, to try to brainwash you into hating the person that they want you to hate. And in order to try to coerce you into feeling the way that they want you to feel, they have to lie to you, and they have to lie by omission to you. Understand that the Democrats, the House Democrats and the mainstream media are deliberately staging a snow job against you. And they know what they're doing. This isn't just, they have a different perspective, and so their perception of this is a little bit different. They are deliberately trying to trick you, to control your mind and your words and your thoughts and your actions. And that is so despicable. So despicable. In these emails, by the way, before we even get to that one, I forgot about this. The Democrats actually deleted a post that they had posted. Again, they're in this desperate, obsessive effort to associate Donald Trump with Epstein's crimes, which they can't because there's no evidence of Donald Trump ever doing anything wrong or knowing about it. They posted a post accusing Donald Trump of spending Thanksgiving with Jeffrey Epstein, but in 2017, which would be while President Trump was president. That was during his first term. And this, the amount of views and impressions, this went wildly viral instantly. But it turns out they had to delete it because it was a lie. It was a hoax. They propagated a hoax because they so desperately want to believe this, and they want you to believe this, and they have absolutely no respect for the truth. None. They have no moral compass whatsoever. None. But they then ignore at the same time the context. The context is important. There's associations, and I mentioned this before. There are some interesting people that Jeffrey Epstein was emailing, not because the people themselves are interesting, but because it's interesting that Jeffrey Epstein would be emailing them specifically. He emailed the White House counsel during the Obama administration. We can bring this up. Why would Jeffrey Epstein be emailing the White House counsel, Catherine Rumler? And what did he say to her? He says that she should speak to the boss. Well, who's the boss? Her boss is Barack Obama, who was president at the time. So Jeffrey Epstein is talking to Obama's White House counsel, giving her directions about what to say to the boss. Huh. And yet, the Democrats have no interest in looking into that. There's something there. And yet they don't care because Donald Trump was not there. Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary asked Jeffrey Epstein for advice about women. That seems pretty significant to me. Epstein in an email, and I have no idea if this is true or not, Jeffrey Epstein in an email claimed that Hillary Clinton had a sexual relationship with Vince Foster. Vince Foster, who, quote unquote, committed suicide in 1993. And it's always been, people have always asked questions about that suicide because it just seemed strange. There's obviously been allegations that Vince Foster, was a hit by the Clintons. And Epstein claims that Hillary Clinton had a sexual relationship with Vince Foster. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But Jeffrey Epstein wrote that in an email. And yet the mainstream media and Democrats have no interest in talking about that, even though it seems like that would be worth investigating. It seems like that would be pretty interesting. Listen, let me circle back to the couple of times this year that we've talked about this. Obviously, on February 27th, that was the day that the Epstein binders were given to me and about a dozen other right-wing independent media figures at the White House. You remember that. We've talked about that extensively because of what it was, because it was Pam Bondi attention-seeking. It made us look bad. It made us, those of us who were given the binders, it made us look like we were gatekeeping or lying or engaging in clickbait, none of which I do, all of which I disavow. And I wanted you to understand exactly what had happened that day. Because while you guys are great and gave me the benefit of the doubt and said, hey, let's wait for Liz to explain this because I don't think she would do that. Obviously, those on the left and, bad faith actors on the right were quick to want to try to leverage that against me in some way. And we did multiple episodes talking about all the details of what happened behind the scenes that day so that you could understand exactly how I got into that position in those photographs. And you can always go back if you need a refresher or if you're new here. I know we have a lot of new listeners and viewers. If you haven't listened to the narratives of what happened on that day in February, go back, go on Spotify or YouTube and look up, Liz Wheeler, Epstein. And there's multiple episodes that explain it all. I think they're fairly informative. And then that was February, the end of February. And then you fast forward to July, and it was in July when Pam Bondi, July 13th, I believe was the date, when Pam Bondi had, or let me rephrase this, when there was a leak to Axios from Pam Bondi, a memo stating that actually there weren't going to be any more Epstein files released. There was nothing else there, and we should just stop asking questions. This was after, of course, she had promised the files and the client list on her desk. She told us she'd given us at the White House in February those binders telling us that the SDNY was subverting the president, subverting the attorney general. They were hiding all the juicy stuff, all the dirt stuff, truckloads and truckloads of documents she promised. And then all of a sudden in July, she goes, actually nothing. There's nothing, not a single document. Please don't ask any more questions. Goodbye. And it was at that point, again, you can go back and watch these episodes. I've said a lot frequently that I'm pretty generous with people on our side. I want the Trump administration to succeed. I share his America First agenda. Nobody was more excited when President Trump was elected than I was. That we were here together when that happened. That doesn't mean that you can't give constructive criticism to an administration or a president or an elected official. If you like them and you want them to succeed, sometimes it's good to give constructive criticism. You're helping them sharpen. I view any constructive criticism of the Trump administration as helping the Trump administration sharpen their administration so that they're the most effective in achieving successfully our shared America First agenda. Again, we've talked about that a lot. However, in July, after having spent months being very generous with Attorney General Pam Bondi, because I thought that she should have been fired for her binder stunt like that afternoon. And I communicated that behind the scenes because that's what you do. First, you try to handle things behind the scenes. And I had not said that publicly in the months that followed the White House binders stunt. But when Pam Bondi finally came out in July and said, there's nothing to see here, no more files, case closed, done, goodbye, don't ask any more questions. I said, you know what? President Trump should think very seriously about Pam Bondi and her role in his administration, because while I know that she has been loyal to him and to his agenda in the past, especially during his the phony impeachment efforts against him, she's become a liability to him. She's become a distraction. She's become an anchor weight on the ability of his administration to effectively fulfill the America First agenda that we voted for, those of us who are supporters of President Trump, especially as it relates to justice. We want justice. Those of us who voted for President Trump, that's one of the big reasons that we voted for him, is because he promised justice for all these wrongdoings that had been inflicted on us, on Trump supporters and, MAGA, you could call it, but on people who were dissenters of the Biden administration's agenda. Those of us who had been harmed by the Fedsurrection on January 6th and, the really shady pipe bomber stuff. Those who had been hurt by COVID lockdowns and abuses. Those who had been targeted by the FBI, pro-lifers and parents who didn't want critical race theory and trans ideology being indoctrinated into their kids in schools. Catholics who were essentially labeled as domestic extremists because of because we say the rosary. Journalists. I mean, I've mentioned before, my producer Spencer, he was raided by the FBI. He was part of Project Veritas at the time. He was raided by the FBI because he dared to investigate Ashley Biden's diary. We need justice for these things. It's not enough for an administration to come in and say, okay, the bad guys aren't in charge anymore. It's not Biden. It's not James Comey. It's not Christopher Wray. It's not these people that are actively seeking to harm us. We're good. That's not enough. It's not enough for the absence of abuse to exist. We need justice and accountability for the abuse that was already inflicted on us. As I said, for January 6th, for COVID, for FBI abuse, for Russiagate. I mean, I know how strongly President Trump feels about how wronged he was, legitimately wronged, with the false accusations of Russiagate. I mean, the Democrats and the mainstream media hamstrung the second half of his first administration with lies. Treasonous lies. And they should all be facing charges. They should all face charges of seditious conspiracy. And they should be put in prison for a long time for subverting a duly elected president. The same with the phony Ukraine impeachment. All of this deep state weaponization. We voted for President Trump because we want justice for it. We don't want to just move past it. It's not just something that's like, okay, let's not harp on it. Let's not be resentful. Let's move forward with our lives. Like, you can do that. But we also need justice. And that's why we voted for President Trump. And so in July, when Pam Bondi had promised us justice for Jeffrey Epstein, because of course the allegation that underpins the Jeffrey Epstein files is that not only was Jeffrey Epstein rich and well-connected, and committed these heinous crimes against underage girls, but he was let off easy. And that's an injustice in and of itself, which stings us to the core because of the crimes, the grisly crimes that he committed. But in addition to that, there are allegations that he was let off easy because of his connections. Because, was he connected to intelligence? Was he connected to politicians? Well, we know he was connected to politicians, and we know he had intel connections. To what extent that impacted the injustice that we saw applied to him, well, that's what Pam Bondi promised us. She promised us answers. She promised us that we would finally see justice for that there would no longer be this unequal standard of justice, where elitists were they were let off easy because they're elitists, while we're targeted by the deep state because we dare to be conservatives and Christians and Trump supporters. We were promised justice, and then we were just dismissed. We were lied to. She told, I have those files on my desk. No, you didn't. You lied because you wanted your video to go viral on X after that Fox News appearance. You wanted to be a star. We voted for President Trump because we want justice. And when that justice was dismissed, we felt betrayed. And there was this article that was written by Reuters a week ago. I think it was on the 8th of November. And I'm going to bring this Reuters article up. It's called, the title of it, a Reuters special report. It's called, In Trump 2.0, Mega-Aligned Influencers and Media Emerge as the New Mainstream. Which, actually in and of itself, is not a bad title. Except because we have, by the way, thanks to you, We have broken the monopoly of the mainstream media. Those of us independent media figures, we have broken the monopoly of the mainstream media. The mainstream media can no longer pull a snow job on you and you be left without the facts. You be left in the dark because they're the gatekeepers of all the information. And if they don't tell you the truth, then you don't have access to the truth. We have successfully broken through that monopoly thanks to free speech on X, thanks to Elon Musk, and thanks to those of you who have been willing to change your habits, who've been willing to say, I'm going to cut the cord on cable news and I'm going to watch the Liz Wheeler show instead. I'm going to support this endeavor, this independent teamwork endeavor that we do together. We have successfully broken through the mainstream media and we should be darn proud of that. I am. I think you are. That title in and of itself is correct. We have become the new mainstream. However, of course, there's always a big however when it comes to places like Reuters. The premise of their article is that right-wing media figures are actually just propagandists of Trump. We're just propagandists. We just run cover for Trump. We just parrot his talking points. We're basically a glorified press office for him. That's the false allegation, but it's an attempt to demean us. It's an attempt to insult us, to damage our credibility. And it's, of course, not true. Actually, this episode is a perfect example of why it's not true, because if right-wing media figures like myself were in fact propagandists who only ran cover for the Trump administration, do you think that I would be so free as to criticize the Attorney General and to say, actually, the Attorney General should be fired or politely asked to resign because she has become a liability for the Trump administration? Do you think that propagandists would say such things? Well, the answer to that is obviously no, but Reuters never too interested in the truth. What's interesting, though, is they actually use the very example that I gave you as, they claim, evidence that right-wing media figures are propagandists. This is what I mean. Reuters says that the fact that, I'm just going to use myself as an example here, although there's a whole bunch of people named in this article, the fact that we criticize Pam Bondi for the lack of justice served in the Jeffrey Epstein files debacle versus blaming President Trump, demanding President Trump's head on a platter. The fact that we blame Bondi shows that we are propagandists for Trump. That's the evidence. And my response to that would be a couple of things. My response to that would be, again, to reiterate, I don't think propagandists criticize high-ranking members of the administration that they're supposed to be propagandists for. That's not how it works. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier in the show, true friends tell the truth, even when it's hard, even when there's consequences, even when you might suffer for telling the truth. A true friend tells you the truth. And when you want the Trump administration, as I do, to be effective, when you want to help sharpen them, that requires telling the truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. And I understand that the truth that Pam Bondi, how long has this been going on now? This is the end of November or mid-November, and we're still talking about that day in February with the Epstein binders. Like, at what point is the Trump administration going to be like, geez, Pam, thanks a lot? At what point do they realize that Pam Bondi is a liability? You would think it would be any day now. The truth of the matter, and as I said, true friends tell you the truth. The truth of the matter is it wasn't Trump's fault. So why would I go after President Trump when it was Pam Bondi who caused this cascade? Yes, I understand that President Trump is the chief executive. Yes, I understand that the buck stops with the president. But it was Pam Bondi's decision to go on Fox News. It was Pam Bondi's words. She's the one who made the claims about the Epstein files. It was Pam Bondi's team who leaked that memo to Axios telling us to just shut up and go home and stop asking questions about Jeffrey Epstein. It was Pam Bondi, start to finish, who created this problem for President Trump. And now you can certainly make the argument that now President Trump has a role to play. Unfortunately, he shouldn't. This was something that was caused by Pam Bondi. He has a role to play in cleaning up this mess because Pam Bondi does work for him. She's his employee. But that's not the same as causing it. So we, as truth tellers, are telling the truth that this was caused by Pam Bondi. We are not attempting to protect President Trump. We are simply stating reality. We are telling the truth, which is something that the mainstream media doesn't do, and Democrats have never done. Which is why the Reuters article was, when I read it, first of all, way too long. No one wants to read something that long. But a lie, start to finish. The mainstream media is just jealous because when they abandon the truth, their viewers and their listeners and their readers abandoned them. And they're jealous because of what we do here every day. We demand justice. And we haven't fully seen that from the Trump administration. There are still radical leftist judges who are abusing their power in impeachable ways, and we haven't seen those judges impeached. We haven't seen some of these politicians who abuse their power, whether it's Adam Schiff in the House of Representatives, whether it's former CIA Director John Brennan, whether it's, Obama and his cronies that manufactured that phony intelligence assessment to falsely accuse President Trump of being associated with Vladimir Putin. We haven't seen any of those people held accountable. We haven't seen Fauci or Hunter Biden or James Comey or specific FBI agents. We may not even know their names who actually inflicted the abuse against us. We haven't seen accountability. And that's why the Epstein files continue to be the story that they are. Because the crimes Epstein committed are not something we're going to tolerate in our country. And we're not going to tolerate a double standard of justice, especially for rich people, powerful people, politically connected people. Especially if that's why he was let off easy. And we voted for President Trump to enact justice in the hard cases. And we haven't seen that yet. But the grisly truth that I mentioned in the title of the show is not the revelations about Jeffrey Epstein, or certainly not about Donald Trump, because there weren't any, in this trove of Epstein emails. The grisly truth is that the mainstream media and the Democrats hate you. In our country right now, young people can't buy homes. They can't afford them. Thanks to open borders and all these illegals flooding our country. This unlimited, unrestricted immigration causing an overflow in our country deliberately. Young Americans can now not buy homes. We have political violence that's been entirely sanctioned by the other side. The left, by and large, thinks it is okay to assassinate your political enemy. And their political enemy is you. This is happening right now. This is the reality that we live in. And yet the mainstream media hates you. The Democrats hate you so much that they manufacture false allegations against President Trump because of this obsessive, weird fixation on trying to associate Donald Trump with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. You know why they are doing this? You know why they're obsessively fixated on this? Because President Trump can't be bought. President Trump cannot be controlled by the uniparty, by the Democrats, by the deep state, by the neocons. President Trump cannot be controlled. President Trump is actually helping the American people. He's prioritizing the American people over the swamp creatures in Washington, D.C. He's addressing the border crisis. He's addressing the inflation. He's addressing the housing crisis. And they hate him for that. They hate him. The grisly truth about the Epstein emails aren't about Jeffrey Epstein, definitely not about Donald Trump, but they tell you everything that you need to know about the mainstream media and about the Democrat Party. I want to pause for just a moment here and thank you for listening and for standing with us. The truth is, Blaze TV only exists because people like you refuse to let fear silence the truth. Darkness never has the final word. Not in America, not with us. This is not just about one personality or one network. It's about a family of people who believe America is worth defending and worth healing. And when you subscribe to Blaze TV, you make sure that the truth has a voice. Not just today, but for the next generation. By joining with us, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with a community that knows America is still worth fighting for. You're choosing courage over censorship, truth over fear, and light over darkness. Join us, I implore you, today at blazetv.com/Liz. You can get $20 off right now. For as little as $8 a month, you can be part of shaping the future. That's blazetv.com/Liz. Also, be sure you're subscribed to this show on YouTube, youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. On X, you can follow me at x.com/Liz_Wheeler. And on Spotify, we have video on Spotify now. You can bring up your Spotify app, search The Liz Wheeler Show, hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. I greatly appreciate everybody who's been doing that. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.